Perfect. Kia ora and welcome to the Officials Hub, and a warm welcome to Angus Gardner. It was 1999 when Angus took up refereeing while attending Shore High School on Sydney's North Shore. In 2011, he was selected to make his international debut refereeing Papua New Guinea versus Vanuatu in Port Moresby.
In 2012, he was selected into the Super Rugby panel and quickly established a name for himself, gaining selection for the Under-20 World Cup later that year. He also gained selection for the 2014 Under-20 World Cup, where he refereed a quarterfinal match.
In 2015, he became a professional referee and got selected as an assistant referee at the 2015 Rugby World Cup. The following year was a big break for Angus when he refereed his first Tier 1 fixture between Ireland and Italy in the Six Nations.
Since then, he has become one of the top referees in the Southern Hemisphere, gaining regular appointments in the Six Nations, Rugby Championships, and the two big test match blocks.
Yeah, so, mate, in 2018, he received a Super Rugby final and received World Rugby Referee of the Year award. His success continued into 2019, where he was selected as part of Team 31 in Japan 2019.
It's been a long day for Sam, as you guys can see, but earlier this year, he was refereeing the Six Nations before the COVID crisis forced him to return to Australia. Later this month, he will referee for the first time, which was actually this week, the Wallabies versus the All Blacks at Eden Park. Oh, mate, what a career so far. Congratulations.
Thanks, guys, and thanks for having me. It's great to be here tonight with everyone, so I hope everyone's keeping safe and well out there. And just so you know, the background for me tonight is actually the hotel room here in Wellington. So it's at the QT Hotel here. So we're hoping that a bit of a shout out to them for looking after us for the week. And the funky wallpaper's just part of their interior design. So.
Perfect, mate. Just before we get started on the questions, any questions you guys have at home, let us know in the comments below, and we'll get back to them at the end of what we've got set, and then we'll come to your guys' questions in the crowd. Firstly, you're in quarantine, or you were in quarantine a couple of weeks ago in New Zealand, flying over from Sydney. How'd you cope with it, and how was it like spending 2 weeks with yourself, training? What was it like?
Yeah, look, really kind of obviously unique situation, and the quarantine provisions were super interesting. We had 3 days kind of single room isolation at the start of the quarantine period when we had COVID testing during that 3 days, and then provided that was all clear, then we were allowed out within the confines of the hotel. So we're based in Christchurch, and there was a big kind of temporary gym set up at the hotel, and obviously a training field that was allocated at certain times throughout that 14-day quarantine. So yeah, really kind of interesting 14 days, because I guess for us, leading into a test match or leading into a game, if it was in New Zealand, you'd come across 3 or 4 days before and do the game. Whereas to have such a big lead in was a really really unique experience. Yeah.
Cool. That's cool. How during these unusual times? Oh, sorry,
just we change.
How during these unusual times you've been keeping fit while in lockdown?
Yeah, so it's a great question. Real challenge, I think, because I think we all face that challenge that when we train by ourselves, trying to keep that self-motivation going, and particularly when COVID was on, like not actually knowing when the games were going to restart, if they were going to restart, when would the date be? And so, trying to cater your fitness around not peaking too early, not going too hard without actually knowing when things were going to kick off was a big challenge. So I guess I took the kind of the philosophy about just trying to do something little every day just to keep things ticking along, whether it was a bike ride with my son or, some body weight stuff out in the backyard. I was luckily enough to have a watt bike at home, so I was able to do a fair few sessions on the watt bike at home. So that was just murder. Yeah, a bit of punishment there, which was nice. So I think more so just around trying to tick something over each day rather than, felt like I had to go for a 10K run and stay at the peak.
Yeah, and that's probably really good for the viewers in Melbourne and around the world that are still in quarantine or
absolutely.
in lockdown and stuff like that to actually keep active.
Mm.
Leaving your wife at home, and we talked about just before we came on here, your very young family at home must be hard. How do you manage this work-life balance? And I'm sure your wife has a lot to contribute to that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, very lucky to have her support, and you know, I mean, I couldn't definitely. There's no way I could do what I could do without, you know, her support and obviously the kids. You know, I guess what I've found really nice about this time is the amount of time we've been able to spend at home. I mean, for a large period of you know, this last little while, we were all on stand down. So to spend that amount of time at home with the kids and Nicole has been, you know, absolutely amazing. So I've really enjoyed that. So I guess when I've kind of come across on this trip, because I've had so much time at home, it hasn't felt like it's been a big issue for us, which is kind of nice. So I guess, you know, it's all relative, really. You know, we're used to probably spending 3 months away on average each year. So this year, you know, I suppose a six weeks trip, which is what we'd planned, is you know, in the scheme of things, pretty minor.
Yeah, and I suppose with Super Rugby just being at home this year, it's been a lot easier as well.
Yeah, fantastic just to travel locally.
Yeah, it's quite funny. Like, it's obviously such a bad thing, but we're going to start thinking about the silver lining. And, you know, there's been a lot of good takeaways from this as well. That, you know, obviously you're going to spend more time at home as well, which you're not often going to be able to do. Like, you know, I got the house cleaned, which never had. So I learned to bake. You know, all these things. So you look at it from a different perspective. It's not all doom and gloom, is it?
Well, the DIY domestic duties had a long list at our place. I can tell you that. I think Nicole was beating me up for the last 6 years of being away. So
no excuses now. No, bloody good. And at the age of 15, you took up the whistle. And why'd you do that? And why do you love it? Like, that's crazy. A 15-year-old, don't you want to be playing still?
Yeah, well, I mean, that was my dream. You know, I loved the game, and as a kid, you know, I just wanted to play with my mates. You know, play games on the weekend. But I got injured. In a game. I hurt my back in a game, and subsequently got diagnosed with a hereditary disease called Sherman's disease in my lumbar spine, which meant that the experts at the time suggested that I don't play. I was running a risk with doing some further damage. So, like, as a 15-year-old, I remember sitting in the you know, in the doctor's waiting room and getting called in to go over my MRI X-ray, and like the doctor said, mate, you may as well take up fishing. And as a 15-year-old, I just burst into tears. I felt like my world was over. You know, rugby and my mates, and, you know, what would they think? And anyway, I was very blessed that what I went to had a refereeing program, and it had a one of the teachers there that was heavily involved in refereeing. And so he took me under his wing and said, mate, why don't you, you know, you love the game, why don't you stay involved by being a referee? And I said, wow, okay, well, you know, that's great. Kind of, I can be involved and do junior games and you know, still give back. So yeah, it was kind of a bit of the silver lining, really, and I guess the rest is kind of history. But I guess at school, I didn't love it initially. I really struggled with the parental, you know, abuse, which we all have at some stage of our officiating careers, whether it be in rugby or netball or tennis or, you know, whatever. Any sport where you're an official, you will always face some level of criticism and abuse. And I guess, you know, when you're first exposed to it is when it's very confrontational. And so I didn't particularly enjoy refereeing at school. And I guess it wasn't really until I left school and I started refereeing senior men's rugby that I really kind of found my passion for it, because I felt like they were playing for the right reasons, and they were playing because of the love of the game, and after match and going back for a beer and, you know, shaking hands with the guys. So I really enjoyed that side of refereeing, and I guess that kind of sparked my passion.
No, I really like that. Like, too many kids are probably thinking, oh, I just want to keep on playing, even though their heart might not be into it. And it's probably something to reach out to, that your local REA referee education officer is definitely a pathway into refereeing as well. You can still play as well. I was,
and I'd encourage that. I think it's probably
Yeah.
great both ways for referees and players to do both.
Yeah. I was lucky like you, and I had a deputy headmaster at school, Skino, or Ben Skeen, for those who don't know him. So he took me under his wing for the first year and two, so really got me involved in it, and that's why you grow to love the game, because the people with it as well.
100%.
Yeah, absolutely.
Talking about your illustrious career, you're at the top of the game at the moment. What's been your favourite moment so far? Whether it's been club final, whether it's been the World Cup that you went to last year, what is it and why?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And my answer is probably going to, I don't know, maybe surprise people out there, but probably the most enjoyable moment in my career was going back to club rugby in Australia and refereeing the Shoot Shield Grand Final, which is our club final. And I reffed a game a few years back. I think it was probably 2016, maybe 2017. I'd gone to Rugby World Cup in 2015 as an AR, and I'd kind of had my breakthrough in 2016. With refereeing some Tier 1 Test matches, and then 2017 continued. But I guess in 2017, I had a window at the end of Super Rugby where the club rugby finals were still running in Sydney, and I was asked whether I was available to be involved in the final series, and I kind of was a bit surprised and thought, yeah, of course I am. But I didn't expect to be, I guess, asked, because I thought that, my Super Rugby season had finished and the guys reffing club rugby were doing their thing. So I wanted to do this final series, and I did the grand final, which was between Norse and Moringa, and at North Sydney Oval. And I guess why it was so special to me is because it reminded me of what the game's about, the grassroots. And, I think seeing that many people there for a club game on a beautiful sunny day in Sydney at North Sydney Oval, there was probably 20,000 people full there because of like genuine passion for the game that wasn't professional. And I guess it was a real kind of reminder about why I got into refereeing and what it's about. And I think sometimes, and I've certainly been guilty of this in my career, that as your career takes off, you get caught up in appointments and games and travel overseas and this new exciting world that you're kind of venturing out into. And I think those things are really important to kind of ground yourself back in. And that's probably been the highlight for me in the last 5-6 years for sure.
That's pretty cool, and real special for us, especially because we referee Premier Rugby down here in Dunedin, and it's pretty special to go out there in front of people who actually enjoy watching rugby and are actually doing it to support their club, to get behind their own club and give back.
Yeah, the volunteers that are out there on the weekend that get paid nothing, and it's just great. That's the beautiful thing about rugby.
Mm-hmm. Definitely, yeah. I especially noticed during this season, the season that eventually started after lockdown, it was like a renewed passion as well for the game. Everyone had been cooped up inside, and you don't know how good you've got it until it's been taken away from you. And I just remember that first round one of Premier, and the club rooms was packed. It was just such a great feeling. Everyone was doing it for the right reasons, like you said, and with the greatest respect to professional rugby, people at this grade are doing it for the right reasons, and the people that come along have, I work with that guy, I see him on the street, they feel a genuine connection with these people in the community,
Yeah, absolutely.
No, bloody good. Next question: what player or players do you enjoy refereeing the most, and why? This will be interesting.
Yeah, look, it's funny. There's a bit of a halfback theme to this, probably. I'm sure people won't be surprised to hear TJ Perinara's name. Again, they're the characters. A lot of those guys are the real kind of characters of the game, and that makes it as enjoyable as kind of part of your refereeing, really. But yeah, I suppose you could categorise that at each different level. You've got some incredible competitors at the international, game, Alan Wynne-Jones, the captain for Wales, and Rory Best over there, ex-captain for Ireland, and then so you've got some incredible players that you're out there running around with, but then back at club footy you have your characters as well. So I think that just makes it all kind of part of the experience, really.
Yeah, I think that TJ Perenara one always sticks in my head. I think it's one we use quite often, especially down here in Otago with great communication skills, is when you and TJ are talking about that penalty, whether he tapped it or not, and it's just great player buy-in and great entertainment.
Yeah, I was pretty wrong that day too.
You said it.
There's loads more referees getting younger and younger. What do you think was the hardest thing about learning to referee, especially at a young age? Obviously, taking up when you're still at school.
Yeah, I think the big challenge for young referees is staying in the game, and I think you see that at schools and in school programs that often people will get involved at school because the games are available, and then uni and all that changes in their lives. But I guess that's a big challenge, is I think the retention from schoolboy or retaining young officials. And I know that a lot of things like abuse and enjoyment and all those things kind of come into it. But I guess the retention of young officials, I think, is a really important thing that we should be focusing on. And I think for my own self coming through, that when I was refereeing at school, that kind of it's not abuse, but it's dealing with the conflict or the confrontation around you being the referee. And some people are naturally more perhaps wired to deal with that mentally, psychologically, whereas others have to learn strategies around it. And I guess you only learn by going through the experiences of it. But I think that kind of conflict management piece is absolutely critical at whatever level you're refereeing. Whether you're refereeing test matches or you're refereeing club rugby, how do you relate to people? How do you frame passionate supporters? Like everyone's entitled to their opinion, and accepting that you're not going to get it right all the time. I mean, you saw that on the weekend with the touchline call that I got wrong in the game. We are human. We are going to get it wrong, and that acceptance piece, whilst you're bitterly disappointed, that's part of what we do. We are only human in the end.
Exactly. And we touched on this in the last interview with John O'Brien, is, it's not always abuse. I think humans, we're naturally wired to get into our shell and defend ourselves and defend why we made such said call or non-decision, rather than just filtering out a lot of those people are just very passionate, and that's how they portray their passion. It comes across in quite a different sort of manner.
And I think we, bringing back that Jono interview, as we talked about vulnerability and being vulnerable to getting things wrong, as it's huge when coming through the ranks and actually owning shit. Actually, I made a poor decision there. Yeah. What can I do next time to make it better?
100%.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree with that. Just being able to have the courage to put your hand up and say, I got that wrong. And I can all I can do is learn from that and move forward.
Exactly. You can't really argue with that.
No, exactly.
No, cool. Really good points there. We'll move on to the next question. Australia Rugby has got some real talent coming through the refereeing ranks. Other than yourself and Hick Berry, the likes of Jordan Way and Damon Murphy. And we've seen the rise of Amy Perrott this year, which has been fantastic as well. We know what she's done. Yeah. Who's the next big thing in rugby refereeing for Australia? Big call coming up.
Yeah.
Well, I think Amy is. That's my personal opinion. I think Amy's an absolute trailblazer for women's officiating and women in sport generally. I think of the glass barriers that she's been able to break through, it's quite remarkable. Her ability to perform at that level, it's there to be seen. And so, I guess having grown up with Amy, I trained with her 2 or 3 times a week. Seeing her work ethic is again testament to how she's been able to achieve that. And I guess I've really admired how she's used any form of setback or any type of kind of hurdle as a challenge, and she's taken that challenge on full force and without kind of playing the why me card type thing. So it's been really impressive to see that.
Yeah, and looking back on that Super Rugby debut that she had this year, she had obviously you as a good mate on the sideline, helping her out, and that's pretty cool to see as well.
Yeah, absolutely. To be able to kind of support her in her achievements, it's been great to be part of.
Heck yeah. We would always like to hope that, that there's a lot of young girls that are considering refereeing and taking up the whistle at a young age that, hey, I can do this, Amy's doing it, why can't I? And take that mantra of, why can't I do this? There's nothing stopping me. And, it's great that we've broken through that barrier now, and, she's shown what she's capable of. And like I said, hopefully more will follow suit. Hey, it'd be great.
Yeah, and I think we're starting to see it not just in rugby. I know in rugby league in Australia, there's a couple of women's referees that are refereeing the top premiership there. So it's great to see that other codes are kind of embracing that as well. And great to see those young women come through and referee as well as the men do, if not better.
Exactly. And it's the old adage, you choose the right person, the best referee on the day. It doesn't matter who they are.
Absolutely.
For those who have no idea, what goes into being part of World Rugby Referee Squad? So meetings, meetups, training sessions, what happens?
Yeah, so with World Rugby, generally there's the 4 international windows throughout the year. So you've got the Six Nations at the start, and you're into the June window, and then you're into Rugby Championship, and then you're into November or the spring tours. So there's generally 4 times throughout the year that we would get together as a group and kind of sit down and reflect on how we're going to go forward in that respective window. So in the past, we've generally tried to meet for mini camps around. So, for example, the Six Nations runs over a 6-week period, or it actually runs over kind of 8 to 10 week period, but there's 6 rounds. So let's say I was on round 1 and 2. So I'd fly up, a week before the first game. We'd go into a mini camp. So all the referees involved in those first 2 rounds, we usually meet at, say, Heathrow Airport, or fly in, do a mini camp conference for the day, look at some collaboration around making sure that our interpretations are consistent across the various competitions that we've been coming from. And then we'd go out and do the games, and then come back the following week and debrief that weekend, and then preview the previous weekend. And generally by that time, you had the next group of referees coming in to the mini camp who were then going to do the next 2 weeks. So it actually worked pretty well, and it was a good way to kind of catch up with everyone, throughout the year. So yeah, that was certainly a huge benefit to the group.
Yeah, and I think that's all really good stuff, because obviously you look at the French competition, they referee slightly different to you, in Aussie, and then obviously down here in New Zealand we ref slightly differently as well, and it's all about changing perspectives. And obviously with this new ruck interpretation that we saw in Super Rugby Aotearoa, we saw the experimental rules in Super Rugby AU. So it's all changing, and trying to get on that same baseline is pretty important.
And I guess the other thing is that the international game, often you might go up to do a Six Nations game, but your 2 assistant referees might say, you might get one from Ireland and one from France, but you guys haven't actually been as a group for maybe 6 months to a year. So that was the other benefit of that kind of team building side of things, and making sure that you could kind of quickly pick up on the relationships to be able to go and do your thing on the weekend.
Yeah, it's huge.
Like we're just as much of a team as the players are as well, that probably players don't really realise that we've just got to have the trust in our peers and our teammates as well as the players do as well, that to back what the AR has fed through to you, that it's going to be accurate and that you can trust them. And in order to do that, you've obviously got to build time with them and bounce ideas off each other, and just genuinely team build, really. So yeah. Cool. Next question. Refereeing the All Blacks versus the Wallabies for this first time in your career. You and Paul Williams are the first referees in a long, long time to referee the home country. How does it feel?
I think it was 1992 was the last time a Bledisloe Cup got refereed by a New Zealander or Australian, and Paul Williams broke that last week.
There you go.
So you're next up.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously a very unique, situation that we find ourselves in globally. So, I think, I come back to what I said earlier about it being about the game. And I guess I just see this as part of the game at the moment. The only way we can kind of, have the game back where it needs to be is for this situation to occur. So, it's certainly unique, but at the end of the day, I think as officials, we're there to referee the game, and it's the game of rugby. And the two teams, yes, there's two teams, but our job is the game, and so that's what I'm there to do. I think as simple as that. And I mean, Super Rugby's been non-neutral for a long time, so it's not, both Paul and I have refed Australian teams before and New Zealand teams before, so there's probably nothing new there. The players are all familiar to us, and it's just about the game, really.
They're just wearing different jerseys this time.
Exactly. Yeah. So what's the lead up like after such a tense game last week? Obviously, you're under the post with that kick from Hodge on the weekend. You're working with the same team of three.
Yep.
So how does your week sort of go, and how do you guys sort of deal with, obviously, the tense match last week, and now we move into a new week and bigger and better things, bigger stadium, probably a more enthusiastic crowd, all black jerseys again. How's it going to be?
Yeah, I think probably the point I make there is that not a lot changes, and I think if there's probably one thing I've learnt over my refereeing career is to keep the routines and the preparation the same, regardless of what game it is. So I did a Mitre 10 Cup warm-up game on Saturday here in Wellington. My preparations and routine for that game are no different to what they're going to be on Sunday for this game. And I think, again, that's something that's been kind of really important to me, that those routines and the things that get you into the headspace to be able to go and referee remain the same, regardless of whether it's a club rugby game or a test match. I've kind of taken the approach that it's about the game, and the game deserves that level of preparation regardless of what level it is. So yeah, not a lot will change. It's good that we've been able to work together as a team on game one. So obviously we do a very thorough review and debrief, and there's always, like in any sport, in any game, there's always things that you can review and learn from. And so it's I suppose about taking what we took out of last week as a team and how we can replicate that and take that into the next game.
Do you, just a quick side note, do you, Ben, Mike and Paul, so the team of four from the weekend, do you all review that game together, or do you do it separately, or what's the process?
Yeah, it's generally done by the lead referee. So the lead referee will kind of lead the review process, and that's a whole range of things. It's obviously looking at the technical side of the game, but also how we as a team of four actually worked. So our communication, we look at how was our preparation, did we deliver on our preparation as a team of four, how did we kind of, what were the key moments in the game that we could, that we thought worked really well, and what could we have improved on if we had that again. So generally it's the lead referee that will make a start on the review, and then the team of four will kind of come in after that process started.
Nice.
When does that review happen? Is that like the Sunday after, or in this case, the Monday after? Or do you give it a day to sort of cool and think about other things?
Yeah, generally we give it a little bit of space after the game, just to let the I suppose the mental side of and emotional side just neutralise a bit. And then generally, it's Monday where we're all having a look at the game footage, going back, looking at the angles, jotting down some notes around the key moments. Tuesday, we'd probably get together and review a playlist of moments in the game that we could talk about. So we'd generally spend Tuesday kind of talking through those moments. Again, what worked, how could we be better here? If we had something similar on this weekend, would we do the same? Could we improve our process here? Did we need to spend a bit more time on that? And then Wednesday's kind of wrapping up the review, and there's someone from World Rugby who's kind of reviewing it more of it from an independent perspective. So then they're in part of that process, so they'll provide some comments around those key moments that we talked about. Maybe they've raised some other key moments which we need to talk about as a team. And then generally by tonight or first thing Thursday, we've kind of signed the game off, and I've already started my preparation for Sunday.
That's really cool. I like how you said that that you'll sit down together and do that, and lead referee will take it and such. We do a similar approach as well. I know Sam and I were reviewing one of his games until 1 a.m. one Saturday night just because we wanted just to go through it. Yeah. Maybe over a couple of jars though, so a bit of a different perspective on that. But it's cool that we still have the same process, whether it's grassroots rugby or international rugby, just to get better and
Yeah, I think the great thing is that Ben, Paul, and myself were able to kind of challenge each other around those moments that we feel are important, and kind of really robust in our review and our honesty and vulnerability around reviewing those moments.
Yeah, and especially with you three who've worked quite a lot together over the time, it's pretty cool. Moving on, because I think this is a pretty cool moment in your career from a standpoint as the World Cup in 2019.
Yep.
What was it like? It was awesome to watch on TV, parking up in a cold Dunedin flat watching the 2019 Rugby World Cup in Tokyo in Japan. What was it like to be part of that Team 21?
Yeah, I think the great thing about a Rugby World Cup is that you're spending 9 weeks together as a team, and that's very unusual in a referee sense, because usually if you have a game, you might be on a 2 or 3 week tour with a couple of the guys, but the fact that you're actually in together as a group, as a team for 9 weeks is pretty amazing. So that was really special, and it was very family oriented. Guys brought the kids up and wives and stuff, and we had that real kind of camaraderie as if we were an actual team. So that was a really special kind of component of the World Cup. And then being in a place like Japan was particularly special with its cultural side. The people there are so warm and friendly, and the food and the stadiums and the actual event itself was absolutely spectacular. So I guess then being able to immerse yourself in the culture for 9 weeks was again really special, and travel around to see, particularly in those pool stages, parts of Japan. So there were some remote-ish areas like Kamishi, which had been hit by, terrible tragedy, with earthquakes and the tsunami that had come through and wiped out villages and kids. And, so, when you go and have games there and the school kids were all there, and, the Emperor flew in for that particular game, and those things are really kind of special moments to be a part of. So, yeah, I guess the whole experience is it's a real once in a lifetime experience that you're incredibly grateful to be a part of. And I guess when you're over there doing rugby refereeing, which is your passion, it's incredibly humbling. Yeah, real privilege.
A 15-year-old kid who had lumbar issues and was crying because he didn't want to give up the game he loved. It's taken him all around the world and to experience experiences like you have. It's amazing. Hindsight's a great thing, but it's good to give it a go.
Yeah. We've only got a couple more, and then we'll move on to a few questions from the crowd, and then we'll let you get on with your prep for Saturday.
Nice. During that tournament and in other games, you've had to communicate with players and officials that don't speak English or a lot of English as their first language. Yep. How does this affect your build-up to the game and your own field ability to communicate with them?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think we're probably at the global game now lucky that most speak English in some form, or there's at least someone in the team that has pretty good English. So, often, as part of your prep, you'd identify that, and then in your pre-match, if the captain doesn't speak really good English, then you just identify another player in the team that you could, work through with the captain. So, yeah, I guess I'd say probably coming through my refereeing career where you were doing, like my first test match was Papua New Guinea versus Vanuatu up in Port Moresby. So, those two teams, didn't have great English. So that was a real challenge. But so I guess your body language is really important in those circumstances, and you almost have to overemphasize with your body language and your signals about explaining your decision through your signals. So that became probably more of a focus in a game like that the players could actually read my body language and read my signals to get my message across. Yeah.
That's a really good point. We said the exact same thing to Jono last week, and he said pretty much the exact same thing as you as well, is that communication isn't just limited to verbal.
Yeah.
It just goes to show that your signals and how you present yourself is just as important, if not more important in some cases.
But you've got one of the best reputations as a referee for someone who has real empathy for the game and players. You've got great rapport with captains. Is that something you've actively tried to work on, or is it just something that comes naturally to you?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that I think you can never take for granted, and I think that it's something that I think you've constantly got to work on and be aware of. Your relationships, how you communicate, how you, I suppose, listen. One of the things I talk about is kind of listen to understand, that sometimes as a referee, you can't just talk at players. You do have to listen. And when you do listen to them, you actually have to understand what they're trying to say to you. So that's one of the things I like to try and bring in is that, sometimes you just have to stop and let the player say what they need to say before you can then either put your message across or deal with, what their concerns are, for the sake of the relationship. So I think that's, as a young referee coming through, I kind of had wished someone had spoken a little bit more about that. That I think sometimes as officials, we think that it's just our job to do the communicating, when in fact, a lot of the time there's subtleties around players and where they are in that moment as well. So, I mean, it's something that you have to work on and kind of review in your games. And I guess it was something that, I continue to do, is look at those times in games where I have interactions with players and how did that interaction come across, and could I have said that differently, or how could I have said that in a way that painted the empathy but also gets my message across? And I think a lot of that is your words, but I think it also is your body language as well. And I suppose that's kind of one of the areas I like to focus on in my review is how am I perceived, to the viewers, to the players, to the people watching at home, or I kind of come across and portray myself, because I think, certainly when you start refereeing rugby that's televised, yes, there's a crowd, and so you're communicating to the crowd and the players, but you're also kind of communicating to the television audience as well. So I think looking at how you come across from that perspective, can change a lot of what you do on the field, I think. And I think it's a really important component.
Mate, that's absolute pearl of worlds there. I've spoken with the best. I think a prime example of that is what we touched on earlier is the TJ Perenara incident, where you're a bit vulnerable and you said, actually, you're right, because you actually listened to what he was trying to say and took it on board. Like a lot of players, they're not just having a gripe. If you think about it, they're saying it because they genuinely have an issue. A lot of the time, sometimes maybe they are having a gripe and just want to whinge. But usually there's a reason for that, and trying to understand why that is and how it's come about, and just taking it on board, at least park them inside the back of your head, and for next time anyway is amazing. No, good as gold. Next question. The social media and the media in general is more and more prevalent in society these days. How do you deal with the scrutiny and media's attention? For example, 2018 with the France and All Blacks game, Benjamin Fall incident.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a huge challenge for referees. When there's incidents in games that are controversial, or when people don't agree with your decision, or I guess I don't read the media now, and I actively stay. I have social media, but I'm not active on it, and that's just my own personal kind of, I suppose, preference. But I don't think it helps you as an official to read into that, because at the end of the day, it's someone's opinion, and people are entitled to their opinion. And sure, you'd hope that people were respectful in how they delivered their opinion, but that's unfortunately the world that we live in sometimes. So I guess for me, not kind of delving in or opening that door is a big part of it, and just staying at arm's length from it makes a big difference. And I know we all crave feedback. We all crave feedback about our performance and about what we do and all that type of stuff. But I think having the probably self-discipline is the wrong word, but having the peace around just not, just being, I suppose, having the peace inside of you that you did your absolute best in the moment and you prepared well. And I think that as an official, if you can look back at the end of the game and say, look, there was no stone unturned. I was physically fit. I prepared well, technically and mentally. And if there's a judgment call in the moment that I got wrong, that's the world I operate in. And having the real peace around that within yourself. And I think that's a huge challenge, and it's an ongoing challenge in the world that we live in. But yeah, I guess I try to come back to that and fall back on your foundations, which is you're out there doing your best in the moment, in the heat of the battle, and you see it and you call it, and that's it.
Yeah, no, I think it's really important, especially to have strong people around you in those vulnerable times, and because we've all had them, all been prevalent in media or around social media, and it's to have strong networks around you, strong people around you is really, really important.
Yeah, absolutely.
No one's immune to it in social media these days. It's so more prevalent to our day-to-day lifestyle, and it's easy enough just to get on their phone and just splurt out something. And like when I had my incident last year, there was a lot of attention around that, and some positive and some negative, and my family saw that, and so it was just about filtering that out and not getting too sucked into it too much, and just being around the people that mean a lot to you and live with you. Like Sam was great, my partner was good, my family was good, and Sam had an incident this year as well, similarly, and we just shut it off for a bit and show some face-to-face human contact.
Exactly.
No, I think the point that you raised there, boys, about your network and your team is massively, it's critical. Who's that person that you can ring up and say, I'm hurting here, or or have a vent let that frustration and emotion out. That's absolutely, vital.
Yeah, that's awesome stuff, Gus. We've just opened up some questions from the floor. First, we'll start off with Mike Rungahickers, who's on Facebook. He said, on a scale of 1 to 10, how brutal are the collisions up close in international footy?
10, and you want to stay out of the way. You don't want to get in the road because you probably won't be refereeing the rest of the game, I think, if you get in the road. So, they are huge. Bone crushing in some cases.
You don't want to think about it too much, really, do you?
Next question, moving along. Quick question. Is there a preference personally for you when it comes to games you officiate? For example, do you prefer international test matches to Super Rugby, or do you love club rugby, especially with the added scrutiny around it?
That's a great question. Obviously, the test matches are the pinnacle of what we can do, and they're called a test for a reason, because they test you and everyone else who's out there. But if I had a preference, I'd say Super Rugby, because I love the intensity that Super Rugby's played at. I love the product. It's a great product, and I really enjoy that style of rugby. And again, that's the beauty of our game. It's so it's so different everywhere you go around. Like, you could go up and do a Six Nations game and the scoreline might be 6-3, no tries, 2 penalties or 3 penalties, and that's the game. And some people up there think, wow, that's a fantastic game.
It's a thriller.
And look, I can understand that, but then you can come down to Super Rugby of 45 points to 35, and it's end to end. So I guess it's your style or your preference for the style of game, really. And I love the Super Rugby product.
Perfect. One for Fraser Reid. How do you feel officials are viewed in the public eye, and what would you change to this?
I think officials get stereotyped in the public eye, and I can understand that. I think all we can do as officials is when we have those moments in public, and we all, will have moments in our careers where possibly we are faced with, a media interview or whatever, is I think showing that vulnerability really shows your human side, and not shying away from, things that you could have done better in games or whatever. And I think when you show that you're vulnerable, it shows that you're human, and it's you, and you're honest. And I think, you can't be criticised for that, I think. And it comes back to that peace thing internally,
Or you shouldn't anyway. Yeah, 100% agree there. Moving right along. Kiwis or Aussies, which fans give you the hardest times? Or is we being New Zealand just as bad as each other?
I always say to people that often when you referee in big stadia with lots of people, the crowd becomes you don't actually notice it. So I often say to people it's harder refereeing a schoolboy game where there's 400 people, because you can hear pretty much every comment. but in big stadia, you can't hear individual comments. So, probably that's that's the best way to describe it.
Just a wee question from me. What is your favourite stadium to referee at?
I'd have to say Ellis Park in South Africa.
Oh, yeah. Classic.
I ref the Springboks against Ireland there, and Springboks against France, and just the history of that stadium.
It's pretty cool.
In a rugby context is amazing. So.
You refereed Mitre 10 Cup for the first time the other week. Had the mighty Otago versus Wellington. Had an absolute rip snorter, actually, with Otago coming from behind. How does that compare to the NRC?
Well, it actually wasn't my first game of Mitre 10 Cup. I came over to New Zealand 10 years ago.
10 years ago, there we go.
10 years ago, just after the tragic earthquakes in Christchurch, and I did I think it was called ITM Cup back then, but
Yeah,
I did Canterbury versus Manawatu at Rugby Park the first week, and then I think I had Hawke's Bay and Tasman at McLean Park up in Napier. So I was fortunate enough to come over a fair while ago and do some Mitre 10 Cup. But look, it's interesting because I think if you look at the NRC and Mitre 10 Cup, they're probably on par. But I think where the Mitre 10 Cup differs from the NRC is that you've had the history of that provincial competition for a very, very long time. Yeah. And I guess the NRC is in its infancy and it doesn't have that, that kind of the passion and the history behind it as a provincial competition. So I think that's the big challenge that we face over in Australia, really.
Yeah. Do you have any plans when it comes to time to retire from officiating? And what would you like to go into?
That's a good question. My background's in project management and property development. So I was previously working for schools, where I'd go into schools and help them build new facilities, so new school halls, new sports stadiums or sports complexes. So I could definitely see myself falling back on that. Whenever the time comes.
Hopefully a wee way down the track.
Not getting too far ahead.
Yeah. How do you relax before a test match or just a match in general? Because as we heard earlier, all your preparation's the same. How do you relax?
Well, I think the key for me is that I'm pretty process driven. And it wouldn't surprise you being a project manager. So I guess
at least this one runs on time. Though.
Absolutely. So the big thing for me is to make sure that I've kind of ticked all my boxes with my preparation. And once I know that I'm kind of organised and I know what time I'm leaving to the ground, and I'm pretty kind of regimented on how my game day looks in terms of what I do in the morning, what time breakfast is, when I stretch, when I do my mental preparation, when I sleep. So I'm very regimented in that. So I guess a lot of my kind of relaxation comes from the fact knowing that I've ticked all my preparation boxes, and just that sense of knowing, I've done all my preparation, I've done my routines. Now I just have to follow it. That kind of gives me the relaxation or the assurance that I need going into the game.
Yeah, nice. A couple last question, Ashley. Is there anything you would like to take from opposite codes as far as refereeing goes? What would it be and why? Like I see the league has brought in the Captain's Challenge. Would you be interested in that? Or
look, we tried a few law variations in Super Rugby AU. We trialled a goal line dropout. So if the ball was held up in goal or knocked on in the in goal or grubbered through into in goal and then grounded, we would go to a line dropout as opposed to a 22 or a 5 metre scrum. And I thought that was fantastic because it got the ball back into play really quickly, and it meant that a team who was under the pump on defence could get the ball out of their territory and back into the hands of the attack really quickly. So I really enjoyed that law variation. I thought it added a lot to the game. We also trialled something similar to what the league does. They have a 40-20 law where if you kick it in the 40 and it goes out in the 20, you get the restart. So we trialled a 50-22 and a 22-50. And again, I thought they were great variations to kind of speed the game up and get it going. So I think the Captain's Challenge is an interesting one because in league, the play breaks down. So they have an opportunity to actually do the Captain's Challenge when the play breaks down. Whereas in rugby, often, you could, let's say there was a knock on at a ruck that you missed. You could potentially go another 10, 12, 15 phases before you actually stop the game. And so for me in rugby, have we lost the moment there? And how would, kind of the spectator side of things go with going all the way back, to a knock on that's 15 phases ago? So I guess that's probably the challenge that we would have in rugby around that, I think.
Perfect.
Very good point.
Just to finish up there, thank you for the viewers on Facebook for those questions. Really thoroughly enjoyed them. Sorry, that's why I'm over on the left-hand side. That's where our Facebook is. But yeah, so thank you for those questions from the floor.
No, good as gold. In conclusion, so we've got any parting words there, Gus?
Look, no, I just think it's great to be able to kind of share these experiences, and these these type of forums are great. I mean, it's about learning and trying to trying to grow. We're all trying to grow as people and on and off the field, and certainly I think that is the great thing about officiating. I think what in any sport you actually take a lot of what you have to put into practice as an official into your own personal life and grow as just the individual. And I've certainly loved that about my refereeing journey to date, is the benefit that's had on my own personal life as a husband, a dad, a friend. So I think it's awesome.
Perfect. Cheers, mate. A massive thank you to you, and thank you to the viewers at home for tuning in.
Thanks for the questions, everyone.
No worries, Gus. And thank you to all our viewers. Thank you to everyone who's on our Facebook, and look out for more content to come.